next, let's go to William Lawrence. He's a professor of political science and international affairs at American University. William, thanks for joining us on the program. The withdrawal of troops from the southern parts of Gaza came at a bit of a surprise. Do you think that this is the Israeli government heeding to international pressure, or is this Netanyahu, as he says, preparing these withdrawn troops for an operation in Rafah?
It's all of the above. So they pulled a division out, which is a huge portion of their army. I think there's only 2+ divisions in the whole Gaza operations. Divisions have brigades, and so that withdrawal, I think, was a concession more to the Americans than the rest of the international pressure. That division had taken a lot of hits, and it could be used for Rafah. It could be used for a conflict to the north with Hezbollah, or it could just simply be, it's reservists in it, and it could be, reconstituted for future conflict. But I think more than anything else, it was a response to the phone call last Thursday between Biden and Netanyahu.
Netanyahu's been talking about invading Rafah for some time now. The US hasn't even been given a date, nor has it been given any kind of plan. It's been, of course, trying to deter Israel from going in. How much sway does the US have, despite fueling this war with arms? Do you think Netanyahu is just trying to negotiate at this point and maybe won't even enter Rafah at all?
The U.S. has more sway than it's been using. I think Netanyahu is trying to save face because he's committed to, quote unquote, eradicating Hamas and to finishing the Rafah operation. And of course, he's trying to prolong the war because his political survival depends on it. But I think the main sticking point is the U.S. said it would refuse to support Israel and it would change its policy towards Israel if Israel goes in without a plan to protect all 1.5 million civilians in and around Rafah. And the U.S. to this date has still said it has seen no plan. And even though the U.S. has been given a lot of criticism and deserves that criticism, they sort of box Netanyahu in because they said either negotiate a ceasefire, or if you're going to go to Rafah, have a plan that protects all 1.5 million civilians, which Israel never produced. And so Israel's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's why for a couple of months now, we've seen no major military operations in Gaza.
The confrontation also with Hezbollah has been steadily escalating since October the 7th. And following the suspected Israeli strike in Damascus that killed several senior commanders in Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guards last week, the threat seems to have grown somewhat. Do you think that that has a contributing factor in terms of Israel's decision to withdraw troops as well?
Not exactly, but what Israel's trying to do is make this a conflict between Israel and Iran, and not a conflict between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians. And so by hitting Damascus hard, it provokes a response, which then changes the international narrative. There's also a great feeling in the north of Israel that there needs to be an operation in Lebanon like 2006, even though the U.S. is hard against that, and even Hezbollah and the Iranians don't want a full-blown war in the north. So while Israel escalates, the U.S. tries to de-escalate, as are the Iranians in their own way, i.e. holding Hezbollah back from a full-scale war. But they killed major leaders of the Iranian military in a diplomatic compound in Damascus, almost forcing the Israelis to respond. And that's why everyone's talking about what Iran's going to do next.
There was a lot of outrage last week of the killing of aid workers by the IDF, but there's been hundreds of aid workers killed, dozens of journalists, people waving white flags and still shot by the IDF. Where was the outrage then? Why do you think it took killing last week's aid workers to change US foreign policy? Is it just that they had specific passports, or is there more to it?
There's more to it, and of course, among them was a Palestinian. And there was a lot of outrage in the American streets, to a degree in Congress, and among not only the Arab and Muslim populations of the U.S., but progressive and young Jewish people, progressives in general. And so there was a lot of outrage in the U.S. to the point that it would put Biden's nomination in some sort of jeopardy and his ability to be elected president. But I think more than anything else, the combination of Jose Andres, a close personal friend and supporter of Biden, having 7 of his closest staff killed, people that had been with him in Ukraine and Morocco and other relief operations well known in Washington and the United States, plus the cancellation of the iftar when the whole Muslim community refused to attend the iftar at the White House. That was, I think, 2 days before that. Even Jill Biden got in on it and apparently chewed out her husband to some degree. So there was a culmination of things that touched Biden more closely than the rest of the violence that had been going on that I think triggered more of an emotional response from Biden than we'd seen before. And that led to the harshest phone call between Biden and Netanyahu that we'd seen since the beginning of the conflict and ever in my lifetime. Right now, the relations between U.S. and Israel are at the lowest point they've been in my lifetime, largely because of Netanyahu's failures.
And how much international pressure do you think is weighing on Netanyahu from Turkey, for example, with these latest export restrictions? Do you think that that will change anything either?
Well, it all builds together. No one thing will do much. Even an Iranian strike, even a Turkish boycott, even if BDS becomes 10 times more successful than it is now, none of that in and of itself triggers a response from Israel. Basically, it comes down to the United States and Netanyahu and the Israeli rights wing. It comes down to the American right wing, which they hope win the elections in November and then flip the policy back much more in favor of a pro-Likud, pro-Zionist, bigoted type of foreign policy that takes the Palestinians to task and not just Hamas. And so, everything is tied together now. But more important than anything else is how Biden is thinking and feeling and what he's instructing his staff to do. And he's instructed Burns to give a new deal. He's instructed the Israelis to negotiate in good faith. And he wants a ceasefire that's temporary and a humanitarian pause that gets 500 trucks in a day, flooding the zone with humanitarian assistance, and then he wants a permanent ceasefire. I don't think very many Americans want the Operation Rafah to happen at all. And if Netanyahu insists it has to be very scaled back, very surgical, and reduced to as close to zero as possible civilian casualties.
All right, William, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. William Lawrence for us.